So to review Romans 1 through 4, all humanity is trapped in sin and in need of rescue. Rescue won't happen by trying to follow the Torah, follow the laws. God's righteousness has rescued the world through Jesus in order to create this faith-based, multi-ethnic, multicultural family rooted in God's promise to Abraham. So we move on to chapter 5 then. So, okay, part of a new family in Jesus. Well, how? What's that mean? And Paul really roots all of this in the Old Testament, in the Torah, in fact. Um, so he's both saying the Torah itself, don't just blindly follow it or try to because you're not going to be able to. And also, it's really important, right? Um, so he looks back to Adam. He goes all the way. Now, remember the name Adam in Hebrew, in the original Hebrew, just means human. Um, the human Adam. Just, it could be Adam, the person, if there was such a person, or just humanity in general, right? So Adam chooses sin and becomes enslaved to it. And he rebels against God. And it's this, again, this cycle of idolatry and sin. And ultimately that leads to death. So we got Adam over here. And then he brings Jesus in and he calls Jesus the new Adam. The new Adam. Jesus's life, contrasting Adam, was marked by faith and obedience to God shown in love, which leads to life. And this makes him the head of a different kind of family, a different kind of following God. And so then in the next chapter, he says, take your old Adam, like if you can imagine an old Adam inside of you. This is where we get the doctrine of original sin. Leave your old Adam, leave that rebellious part, and follow Jesus instead. And he starts talking about baptism as this sacred symbol of the old way drowning, the old Adam drowning, the old Adam dying, and a new life is born. Right? The old humanity died in the waters of baptism. The old humanity died with Jesus on the cross, and the new is raised with him. And so when a person, he says, when a person trusts in Jesus, then their life sort of, it's almost like Jesus grabs our hand and we walk along with Jesus. And so Jesus is made righteous by God. Jesus is righteous. And so what's true of Jesus then can also be true of those who are baptized, can also be true of those who grab onto Jesus. The old is gone and the new is come. And so the new life in Jesus then, the new Adam, is a life of liberation, liberated from the bondage of sin and death. Remember, sin and death, evil personified, like as if they're this evil force that's got a grip on us. We're liberated to love God and love the neighbor, which was the purpose of the Torah, was the purpose of the law in the first place. Charles Wesley said it this way. He said, my chains fell off, my heart was free, I rose, went forth, and followed thee. That's getting into this Romans 6 language. So then in 7, he asks this question, okay, well, if all that's true, because remember, he's doing this back and forth talking to himself thing. If all that's true, then what was the purpose of the law anyway? Why did God give it to him? Well, he says the Torah was and is good. It's not a bad thing. It showed God's commandments for Israel, and yet they broke them. And there's this paradoxical thing happening. The more commandments they received, the more they broke them. And the more they became enslaved to sin, and the more guilty they became. The more like the old Adam they became. Evil had hijacked the human soul. Paul doesn't use those words, of course. Hijacked wasn't a word for Paul, but evil had hijacked the human soul. The Torah alone, therefore, as good as it is, cannot overcome this evil hijacking the human soul. He's in the first 8 chapters or so. Paul is saying saying the same thing many ways. He's getting at it from different angles, trying to answer questions. So in 8, then he says that the commandments of the Torah are almost like a magnifying glass. It focuses the problem of the human condition, this enslavement to sin and death, focuses it on one group of people, which is Israel. And now their representative, Jesus the Messiah, has dealt with the guilt. He's dealt with the punishment. He's paid all of it with his life. And now, free from that guilt, Jesus has released his spirit into the new family that he's created. Remember, the slate is wiped clean. He's released his spirit into these people whose slate has been wiped clean, so that they can be fully liberated to fulfill the Torah's commandments, which are to love God and love your neighbor. And ultimately, he gets at in Romans 8, God's goal in all of this is not just the renewal of the human soul, but it's the renewal of all of creation, earth and heaven colliding. So let's review Romans 5 through 8. The old Adam is this idea. The old Adam is enslaved to sin, the old human being, right? Jesus, we might imagine, is like a new Adam, a new kind of humanity, leading a new family. So he says, leave your old Adam behind, die to yourself, be drowned in the waters of baptism so that you can live in Jesus. He says, evil has hijacked the human heart so much so that the Torah itself could not overcome it. But Jesus took on the guilt of humanity and gives the Spirit to liberate the human heart for renewal so that we can truly follow the Torah's commandment to love God and love our neighbor. So that's the first half of Romans. Again, read it slowly. We'll walk through it slowly together.